Something big is happening on Comex. I've been screaming that forever, right? And in the December contract, which went on when it went off the board, I 29th, a couple days after maybe the day after Thanksgiving. So far, over 10,000 Comex silver futures contracts have stood for delivery. 10,000 at 5,000 ounces each. That's more than 50 million ounces of silver that have been taken off the exchange, including 565 contracts or 2.8 million ounces in a single day. Over 60% of the Comex registered silver was claimed in just the first 4 days of trading in the 2025 December contract. The demand for physical metal is massively accelerating. This is not normal flow. This is institutional accumulation.
Something far bigger than a simple delivery month spike is happening on Comex, and Andy Schectman is one of the few voices openly warning that this isn't normal market behavior, it's structural stress. The December 2025 silver contract alone has already seen over 10,000 futures contracts stand for delivery, representing more than 50 million ounces of physical metal ripped off the exchange in days. And even more telling, 565 contracts, 2.8 million ounces, were demanded in a single day. These aren't retail buyers. This is large-scale, coordinated institutional accumulation that directly challenges the credibility of the fractional gold-silver system. Because when Comex loses 60% of its registered silver in the first 4 days of a new delivery month, we are no longer talking about volatility. We are talking about a vote of no confidence. Physical metal is disappearing into private hands, sovereign vaults, and opaque non-Western channels faster than the paper market can respond. This is exactly the type of stress event that exposes how thin the physical backing really is beneath decades of leveraged paper trading. And at the same time, we are witnessing the arrival of something Andy believes could fundamentally rewrite the global precious metals ecosystem: fully allocated, instantly transferable, tokenized gold. Unlike the existing system, where 1 ounce can be sold dozens of times through rehypothecation, tokenized gold operates outside the paper shell game, offering verifiable, auditable ownership of real metal. To Andy, this isn't a niche innovation. It's a direct threat to the Comex LBMA system and a potential catalyst for the collapse of the unallocated paper gold market. That's the backdrop for today's video. Deliveries surging, trust evaporating, central banks repatriating gold, and a generational shift toward transparent, allocated, blockchain-verified metal that bypasses the Western price-setting architecture. Andy Schectman is convinced the old system is cracking, and the numbers support him. And now, let's dive into exactly what Andy is seeing, beginning with how the gold market's fractional structure is starting to unravel. Before we play the clips from Andy's interview, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and share this analysis with someone who still thinks the Comex sets the real price of silver. What's happening behind the scenes tells a very different story, and you'll understand it in the next few minutes. We appreciate the support and hope you enjoy the video.
You know, the gold market globally operates on a fractional levered system, and we're seeing some of that start to crack right now with the amount of deliveries. And that system basically operates where a small amount of physical metal backs large volume in paper claims. That's the rehypothecation that you speak about. In other words, each ounce is sold over and over and over and over again because no one ever stood for delivery. And that's why it's worked for decades, because few ever did. In fact, when you and I start talking about the others in 2020, the group on the Comex said was standing for delivery, that was the central thesis of everything I was saying. You're like, this is so weird, Dunnigan, because all of a sudden it went from 0 to 100 where no one was standing for delivery. Now you got this big group standing for delivery. But now you have central banks repatriating gold. Remember all the banks that we talked about, the German Bundesbank, the Dutch National Bank, the Bank of Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Poland, the Czech National Bank. They all repatriated their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. It's about trust. And investors now are shifting, as you mentioned, to this tokenized gold. And the more I dig into the offers or to the possible opportunities that have been presented to me, the more I begin to think, yeah, this may actually have a profound effect because it gives fully allocated and instantly transferable and fungible ownership of the real metal. Not only does this undermine demand for paper gold, which has, I think, been exposed by much of the world. They see the rehypothecation. They see the Achilles heel of the system is standing for delivery. It also gives very intriguing options for collateralization of your metal that many of us who have, a large portion of your assets in gold and silver come to a point where you want to buy a home or you want to do something, you need collateral. And the banks, well, how do I know you got metal in your closet and blah, blah, blah. You can't use it. This does. But what I could see happening actually because of this transparency and because of this instant validation and transferability and collateralization, I think you could see a lot of investors exit the paper system for allocated tokenized gold, at which point the system could face that sudden collapse triggered by unorderly unraveling of unhedged, rehypothecated exposure. And I think the bottom line is that tokenized gold is not just a new form of gold or better gold, whatever people want to call it. It's a potential catalyst, to this gentleman's point, for the collapse of the entire paper gold system. I agree with him, because paper promises that have been exposed for being BS, I think this is the antidote for it. And if done properly, could rewrite the entire ecosystem. They've been pretty successful at hoodwinking us all. But that's why I said if done right. To me, when speaking to the folks about this that I'm in discussions with, I said to them, there are just a very few things that need to make this work. Number one, it has to be transparent. Obviously, that's the whole premise of blockchain. So that's nothing profound. But it has to be transparent in the respect of who's holding the gold. Is it an institution like Brinks or the Royal Canadian Mint or some major mint, the Perth Mint, the US? Who's holding it? In what form is it held? Who's auditing it? And the key to it all, in what form and how easy is it for me to take delivery? And that's the most important part. In other words, any exchange that doesn't allow delivery or any platform that doesn't allow delivery, it's fugazi. You can throw it right out the window right now because it ain't going to work. The whole premise of the whole reason the LBMA and the Comex have worked, even though they've rigged the system, is that they allow delivery. Even though no one ever stood for delivery way back when, they do allow it. That is the key. And if you want to really come out the gates screaming, who owns it, who audits it, what form, and how easy and what form can it be delivered? Those are the things that could very quickly tip the scales. And I think when a system loses trust, and I think this has been an overreaching theme that you and I have talked about for a while, this whole country, this whole thing, it's not just the country, it's everything about it: judicial system, electoral system, immigration system, wokeness instead of meritocracy, all the stuff we talked about ad nauseum for years, especially during the previous administration. And then on top of it, sanctions, well, you call them tariffs, but they're actually sanctions masquerading as tariffs. The way that this administration, and granted, I'm glad he won and I would vote for him again, but there are some things he is doing that is eroding trust, even with our allies, by placing tariffs on Mexico and Canada and the EU. And, there are things. This whole system is about, I think, a fraying of trust. And so if you want to make this work, it has to be completely and totally trustworthy. And that would be being very open and transparent about all of those things, including who's auditing it, how easy it is to see the audits, and if I want to stand for delivery, in what form and how easy is it for me to do that. If those things all became relevant, then yeah, because I think we're reaching a point in time where the Comex and the LBMA are losing trust globally. And that's why you see everyone standing for delivery the way that they are, because these countries don't want paper promises anymore. I think they want the real thing in their possession, and that's more important than anything else to these players. So yeah, if done the right way, to your point, which is a valid one, then I think it has legs. It really does. I think this would be an antidote for the Comex and the LBMA, in the respect that the Comex and the LBMA are the ones that are losing credibility. The only reason to have it on a blockchain as an investor, I guess, would be for ease and collateralization. If If you don't need collateral and you don't care about, the benefits of having that type of platform, I think you're better off holding it at home myself, or burying in the hole in your backyard or whatnot. But, part of running a business, done again, and I think this has maybe been one of my strong points for a long time, or maybe not. I mean, I kind of feel like it has been in my own mind, but that's not even up for debate. All I'm just simply saying is that running a business means if you don't learn to roll with the changes, you get rolled by them. And I think it's pretty well determined now that things are moving to tokenization. I mean, you look at the chairman of the SEC just came out and said all markets will be tokenized very soon. And I think that we are moving in that direction. You can see the stablecoin Act, the Genius Act. Things are moving to that platform where it's a system that will be about transparency and about the ability to collateralize and to use things that are tokenized. Do I like it? No. I would rather be back even before cell phones, and we had to go to a payphone to call your girlfriend or whatever. It's like, I would just say to you that doesn't matter. The toothpaste is out of the tube, and either you roll with the changes or you get rolled over by them and you become an afterthought. So I think it is happening. To me, the best place for it, if the world wanted to challenge the West, the way to do it is to develop a system like this where there is transparency, deliverability, and low friction. These things are happening, and whether the West does it first or not, I just think it doesn't matter. It's moving in that direction. Now, as far as the average person, I guess there are benefits to having it tokenized as well, if you can stand for delivery. Otherwise, everything is just, again, up in the cloud. So there is the middle ground there. The middle ground is you have your physical position at home or wherever you store it, and then you have something tokenized to give you collateralization potential or the ability to access it much more easily. So that to me is about as middle ground as you get.
What Andy describes here is the core fragility of the Western gold market. It is a fractional, rehypothecated system built on the assumption that almost nobody will ever stand for delivery. For decades, that assumption held. Physical demand was a rounding error. Futures rolled over endlessly. 1 ounce could support 20 or more paper claims because nobody asked for the bar. But that world is gone. In Andy's words, the shift happened from 0 to 100. Central banks, Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, Poland, Hungary, Turkey, the Czech National Bank, all quietly repatriated their gold. That single wave of repatriation was the first global signal that trust in custodians like the New York Fed and Bank of England was fading. Now investors are turning to tokenized allocated metal, not because it's trendy, but because it eliminates the exact loopholes that Comex and LBMA rely on. Tokenized gold is fully allocated, instantly verifiable, and directly deliverable. And if a platform cannot deliver, Andy is blunt. It's worthless. Deliverability is the foundation. Without it, you're just trading another digital IOU. That's why Andy believes tokenized gold is not merely an innovation, it is the antidote to paper gold. If enough capital moves into allocated, transparent, deliverable metal, the paper system could face an uncontrolled unwinding as unhedged liabilities collapse. Let's get back to Andy's video.
Look, the trend is here. And the thing is, mainstream doesn't notice the trend. And I think maybe even the people who watch this show don't really realize how big the trend is. Over the last 10 years, price of gold has gone from 1,100 to 4,200. That's a 256% increase. And price of silver has moved from 13 to 57. That's a 315% increase. But I think the real trend right now is in deliveries, like we were talking about. Something big is happening on Comex. I've been screaming that forever, right? And in the December contract, which went off the board 29th, a couple days after maybe the day after Thanksgiving. So far, over 10,000 Comex silver futures contracts have stood for delivery. 10,000 at 5,000 ounces each. That's more than 50 million ounces of silver that have been taken off the exchange, including 565 contracts or 2.8 million ounces in a single day. So over 60% of the Comex registered silver was claimed in just the first 4 days of trading in the 2025 December contract. The demand for physical metal is massively accelerating. This is not normal flow. This is institutional accumulation. And I think that this is something that cannot be overlooked. It really can't be. At the same time, you even have Reuters coming out and saying that the London silver tightness or the liquidity crisis is real and it's happening. And so you're finding cracks within the system as you see massive shortness and demand for delivery. At the same time, you have countries like China and India and Saudi Arabia and Russia that have been accumulating silver, taking possession of silver and gold, reintegrating it into their system. We're seeing China, the second largest producer in the world, as I've said on your show 1,000,000 times, they're going to Mexico and Peru and buying doré and concentrate before it even hits the market by buying this stuff in a pre-refined stage. So they're locking up supply at the source long before it has any chance of reaching the global exchanges. And so I think that this is putting huge stress on the market. Ultimately, will put massive stress on the market. And then you have the U.S. Department of Interior, who adds silver to the 2025 critical minerals list, as we've talked about. And in order to get on that list, by the way, the metal has to be essential to the economy or to national security. Should have a vulnerable supply chain and no easy substitute. So this creates strategic stockpiling demand, and again, and a structural tailwind for demand that's supported by national security and policy. And they should be worried about the supply chain and the geopolitical risk. Because the United States imports 2/3 of its silver. And, I was reading something the other day that blew my mind. It says AI data centers especially burn through silver. It says every server and power unit uses a little, but tens of thousands of machines lock up thousands of ounces permanently. And powering these centers is even more silver intensive. A 500 megawatt solar farm, enough for one major AI campus, can require up to 300 metric tons of silver, or 9 to 10 million ounces. So all of this is happening while the U.S. relies heavily on foreign silver, and physical metal is leaving the transparent markets. 75 million ounces have been pulled from Comex since October. 583 million paper ounces traded on Friday. That's 75% of annual global mine supply in one day. And the Comex had 103 deliveries and the LBMA 553. So, it's getting crazy. In China on Friday, silver closed above $60 an ounce. And so, we keep seeing the price higher in China, which is kind of pulling the price along with it. I just think that things are beginning to really, really, really change. And now you got banks like UBS who are vocal saying that the 300 million ounce physical deficit, and we've been seeing that every year between 1 and 300 million ounces going on the 6th year in a row, is turning them bullish. And they recommend long positions in silver they've never have before. So yeah, I think when you talk about central banks repatriating gold and all of the stuff we've been talking about, standing for delivery, sovereign wealth funds, commercial banks, huge deliveries, to me, what this boils down to is that it will ultimately trickle down into the retail market. And it hasn't yet, but it will. And when it does, it will happen very quickly. Things will just become very difficult to obtain. It doesn't happen at the highest levels and then just stop. I think you'll see it move down into the retail market. It's interesting because on just about everything but American products, premiums are as low as I've ever seen them. The American products, they seem to be going higher and higher. But you will find, I think, that what is a easy to get, flush, supplied, laden market in retail very quickly will change. Not there yet, but I think it will, based upon what we're seeing around the globe. The retail public is just more or less asleep.
If you step back from the individual numbers, the broader pattern becomes undeniable. Comex is losing physical inventory at the very moment global industrial demand is exploding. The LBMA is experiencing verified liquidity stress. Central banks are repatriating gold. Nations outside the Western sphere are locking up supply long before it reaches transparent exchanges. and investors are migrating toward allocated, tokenized systems precisely because the old structure no longer inspires confidence. This is not a commodity cycle. This is not a speculative blow-off. This is a global transition away from Western paper metals. Andy Schectman has been warning that the fracture would appear first through delivery stress. And now the fracture is visible. The question is no longer whether silver and gold markets will reset. The question is how orderly that reset will be. And based on the numbers he just presented, that window for an orderly transition is closing. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who still believes the Comex paper price reflects real silver demand. And comment below, do you think the Western paper system survives the next decade? Your insights help drive this conversation forward, and we have much more to analyze in the days and weeks ahead. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.